Okay, we're going to make a start on today's lesson. So welcome everyone to our GCSE Maths session. In today's lesson, we are going to be continuing with what we looked at in our last lesson, and we're going to be looking at some more sort of difficult questions on parallel and perpendicular lines. So we've already looked at this. We looked at this in our last lesson, and the recording has been shared for those who weren't able to attend. But today is just going to be about looking at sort of more difficult questions and just having a summary on this topic. So in our first lesson, we looked at sort of working out the length of a line, working out the midpoint of a line. We then moved on to the equation of a line, and then we looked at parallel lines, and now we're going to finish off by looking at perpendicular lines. Okay, we've got a few exam questions to go through, and I'm going to go through those exam questions. And then I've also prepared a Blookit to go through, so we're going to have a look at a Blookit. So it's like Kahoot, for those who haven't heard of Blookit before, but it's sort of a 10-question quiz, like Blookit, and there'll be leaderboard of who wins as well. If you can't access the Q&A, there's a QR code which is on the screen, and you can scan that QR code to basically ask questions if you can't access the Q&A. So first thing first, I'm going to go through the starter question here. So we had this question. We did have a look at this in our last lesson, and we're just going to have a look at it again just as a starter. So we need to write down the equation of a line which is perpendicular to y equals minus 3 over 2x minus 1, and it passes through 0, minus 8. And the way that we would do this, remember, we need to first check if the line is in the correct format. So remember, we have to check for the format first, and we want it in the format of y equals mx plus c. That's the format that we want it in. And just as a quick recap, we know that m is the gradient, and we know that c is the y-intercept. Okay, and the y-intercept is just the place that the line crosses the y-axis at. So we've got this equation. It's in the correct format. So we have a y followed by mx, and then we have a plus c. So it's in the correct format. So the next thing we have to do, we want to work out what's perpendicular. So when we're working out perpendicular lines, we always need to find the negative reciprocal of the gradient. Okay, so we're going to find the negative reciprocal of the gradient. Okay, that's what we're going to do. So as you can see in our example, we have y equals minus 3 over 2x minus 1. Now the original gradient, the m, is minus 3 over 2. So we're going to find the negative reciprocal of this gradient. And the way that we find the negative reciprocal, we literally get the gradient, which is minus 3 over 2. If it's a negative, we turn it into a positive. If it's a positive, we turn it into a negative. So it's a negative, so we're going to turn it into a positive. And all we're going to do is we're going to flip these two numbers around. So it's going to be positive 2/3. That's the gradient of the line which is perpendicular. Okay, so this is the gradient of the perpendicular line. Okay, now we're going to write down our new equation. Okay, so step 3 is going to be write down the new equation. Now, in the new equation, our gradient is going to be the one which we have worked out. It's going to be 2 over 3. So our new equation has to be in this format, y equals mx plus c. We know what m is because we've just worked it out. M is going to be 2/3. So it's going to be y equals 2/3 x plus c. Now, we know it passes through 0, minus 8. As you can see over here, it passes through 0, minus 8. And remember, in coordinates, the first number is the x, the second number is the y. So we're just going to substitute in these numbers in place for x and y over here. Okay, so the fourth step is going to be to substitute in x and y. Okay, so we know that y is minus 8. We know that y is minus 8. and we know we have your 2/3 over here, and then we have the x, which is 0, and then we have plus c. Now, 2/3 multiplied by 0, that's just 0, and that's equal to -8 plus c. So that means that c is just equal to -8, okay, because c plus 0 is just c. So we know what c is. C is -8. We've worked that out. Now we can go back to our original equation over here, and we can substitute it back into the original equation. So we had y equals 2/3 x plus c, but now we know what c is. C is -8, so we can go back and substitute it in to get a final answer of y equals 2/3 x minus 8. That's our final answer, and that's the equation of the line, which is perpendicular to y equals -3/2x minus 1. Okay, so just to reiterate, the first thing that we check if the line is in the correct format, and the correct format must be y equals mx plus c. It has to be in that format. M is the gradient, c is the y-intercept. Okay, and then we need to, because we're working out perpendicular lines, we always need to work out the negative reciprocal of the gradient. And that just means change the sign in front of it. If it's a positive, it becomes a negative. If it's a negative, it becomes a positive. And then just flip the fraction around. That gets you the negative reciprocal. So we worked out our negative reciprocal, which is 2/3, and that's the gradient of the new line. Okay, so now we construct the new equation in the same format, y equals mx plus c, and we know that m, which we've just worked out, m is the gradient, that's 2/3. So we're just going to substitute it in place of m. So we have y equals 2/3 x plus c. Now, we need to make sure that it passes through these coordinates over here, 0, -8. And we know that the first coordinate is 0, and the second coordinate is y, so it's -8. So over here, we can see that we have a y here and an x over here. So we're just going to replace those letters with numbers. Okay, so we know that x is 0 and y is -8. So we're going to replace those numbers, and then we're going to rearrange to work out what c is going to be. And then we rearrange to get that c is equal to -8. And then we're just going to go back to the original equation, this equation, and substitute our value for c that we have just worked out. So it's going to be y equals 2/3 x minus 8. Okay, so that's just a bit of a recap from what we did in our last lesson. Today we're going to move on to a bit more complicated style of questions, and I'm going to have a go at the first one as a model example, and then I've got some for you guys to have a go at. So it says line A passes through the points 1, 5 and 5, 7. Find the equation of the line perpendicular to A that passes through -1, 7. So the way that we are going to do this is basically we're going to work out what the gradient of the so when we're given two coordinates, we need to work out the gradient. Okay, so we're going to work out the gradient of line A first. Then if we know the gradient of the original line, then we can work out what the perpendicular gradient is going to be for our equation. Okay, so step one, we're going to work out the gradient of the original line. So work out okay, so how do we work out the gradient? The gradient is going to be the change in y divided by the change in x. That's how you work out the gradient. Okay, and we're given two coordinates over here. We're given 1, 5, and we're given 5, 7. Okay, those are the two coordinates that we're given. And we know that the first number is the x coordinate and the second number is the y coordinate. Okay, and the same over here, x and y. We're going to label the first coordinate number 1, and we're going to label the second coordinate number 2. And we're going to work out the difference between the y values. We're going to do the second coordinate, subtract the first coordinate. Okay, so the second coordinate, the y values are 7. And then the first coordinate, the y value is 5. So we're going to do 7 subtract 5. And then we're going to divide it by the change in x. So the x value on the second coordinate is 5. And then the x value on the first coordinate is 1. So we're going to do 5 subtract 1. Okay, now 7 subtract 5 gives you 2. And 5 subtract 1 gives you 4. Okay, so we have 2 divided by 4, which is just a half. So this over here is the gradient of our original line. Okay, so gradient of original line. But we don't want the gradient of the original line. We want the line which is perpendicular to the original line. If it's perpendicular, that means that we find the negative reciprocal of the gradient that we've just worked out. So the second step that we do is work out the negative reciprocal of the gradient. So work out negative reciprocal of the original gradient. That's what we're going to do. So we know that our original gradient was a half. Okay, all we're going to do is we're going to flip these two around. So it's going to become 2 over 1. Now 2 over 1 is just 2. And it was positive originally, that it's going to become negative now. So it's going to be negative 2. So the negative reciprocal of the original gradient is negative 2. So this is going to be the gradient of our perpendicular line. Okay, so gradient of perpendicular line is minus 2. Now, the third step that we're going to do is we're going to write down our equation. So we know that our equation must have the format y equals mx plus c. We have worked out what m is. This is m. That's what we've just worked out. So we know it's going to be y equals minus 2x plus c. Okay, and now we need to make sure that it passes through these coordinates, minus 1, 7. Okay, so again, the first number is the x coordinate and the second number is the y coordinate. So in this equation, we also have an x and a y. We have a y over here and an x over here. So we're going to replace those letters with a number. So we know that y is equal to 7. So instead of y, we're going to write down 7 is equal to minus 2. And then instead of x, we're going to write down minus 1, as you can see over here. And then we're going to have plus c. Minus 2 multiplied by minus 1 is just going to give you positive 2. 7 is going to stay the same over here, and then we have your plus c, and we want c by itself. We don't want anything else with c in it. So all we're going to do is we're going to subtract 2 from both sides, and you're going to be left with c equals 5. Okay, because we want c by itself. At the moment, the 2 is being added on that side, so to get rid of it, we need to do the opposite of it. So we're going to subtract 2 from both sides to get what c is. C is 5. Now, once you know what c is, you can go back to the original equation over here, and you can substitute in your value for c. So we had y equals minus 2x plus c. We know what c is now. C is 5, so we can write down our full equation, y equals minus 2x plus 5. Okay, so that's our final answer there. Okay, so just going over it again, when you're given 2 coordinates, work out your gradient. Okay, so work out the gradient of your original line. Once you've worked out the gradient of your original line, this is your original line, you need to work out the line which is perpendicular. If it's parallel, the gradient stays the same. However, we want to work out what the perpendicular line is. So we're going to find out the negative reciprocal of the original gradient. And when we're finding our negative reciprocal, we flip the numerator and the denominator around. If it's positive, becomes negative. If it's negative, becomes positive. We flip the sign. And that's when it says negative reciprocal. Okay, some questions might ask you, like for 1 mark, what is the reciprocal? If it says reciprocal, you just flip the fraction around. If it says negative reciprocal, you change the sign, which is in front of the fraction as well. So you have minus 2 there. That's your gradient of the line which is perpendicular. Then you construct your equation of your line. So you have y equals minus 2x plus c because you've just worked out what your gradient is. It needs to go through these coordinates, minus 1, 7. And then all you do, the first coordinate is the x, the second coordinate is the y. So you just replace the x and the y in the equation over here. For your y and the x, you replace it with numbers and you rearrange to work out what c is and then substitute it back into the original equation. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to move on to another question, and I want you guys to have a go at this question. I'm going to give you guys 1 or 2 minutes, have a go at this question and let me know what you guys get. If you have any questions, let me know. So you won't explicitly cover this topic specifically in year 9. You might cover it later on in year 10. However, it would be good practice again to get it done in year 9. And again, if you've um, watched the recordings of you've been to lessons from the last couple of weeks, then you should be finding this okay. But you won't explicitly cover this topic in school specifically in year 9. You'll cover it later on. Just 1 more minute, and then I'm going to go through the answers. Okay, I'm going to go through the answers now. Okay, so it says line A passes through the points 2, -5 and 10, -1. Find the equation of the line perpendicular to A that passes through 4, 3. So the way that we would answer this question, again, we're given two coordinates. So what we're going to do is we're going to work out what the gradient of the original line is. So step 1 is going to be work out the gradient of the original line. So we have 2 minus 5, and we have 10 minus 1. And we know that this is x, this is y, this is x, and this is y. And this is the first coordinate, and this is the second coordinate. So all we're going to do is we're going to do the change in y divided by the change in x. So we're going to do the second coordinate, subtract the first coordinate, and then we're going to do the same for the x. Okay, so we're going to do minus 1 minus 5 over change in x, 10 minus 2. So minus 1 minus 5 is the same as minus 1, add 5, that becomes a add, so that becomes 4, over 10 minus 2, which is just 8, and 4 over 8 is the same as a half. Okay, so our gradient over here is a half. That's the gradient of your original line. Now we need to work out the gradient of the perpendicular line. So gradient of perpendicular line. And remember, for the perpendicular line, the gradient has to be the negative reciprocal. Okay, so we had a half originally. We're going to flip these two around. So it's going to become 2 over 1, which is just 2. And then we're going to, it was originally positive, we're going to turn it into negative. So it's going to be negative 2. That's the gradient of the line which is perpendicular. And then what you're going to do is you're going to construct the equation. Okay, so you're going to write down the equation of the perpendicular line. Okay, so over here, we've worked out the gradient of the perpendicular line, which is minus 2. So you're going to have y equals mx plus c. We know that m, the gradient, is minus 2. We've just worked that out. So y equals minus 2x plus c. And we know that it needs to pass through 4, 3. And 4, 3 is just the x value over here and the y value over there. So we're just going to substitute in numbers instead of letters into our equation. So y is 3 and x is 4, minus 2. And instead of x, we're going to write down 4 plus c. Okay, so we've got 3 over here. Minus 2 times 4 is minus 8 plus c. And then to get rid of the 8, we want c by itself. We're going to do the opposite, add 8 and to both sides. So we're going to have 11 on this side and get rid of the minus 8 on that side. So we have 11 equals c. So now we know what 11 is. We're going to substitute it into this equation over here. Okay, so we're going to have y equals minus 2x plus 11 as our final answer. Okay, so we've just worked out what c is. So the final answer there, the equation of the line which is perpendicular to A is y equals minus 2x plus 11. Okay? Okay, so another question for you guys to have a go at. This time it's not perpendicular, it's parallel. Okay, so again, follow the same steps, but this time you're not going to have to work out the negative reciprocal because the line is parallel and it's not perpendicular. Once you have an answer, let me know in the Q&A or in the form by scanning the QR code. The answer to the previous question was y equals minus 2x plus 11. Yeah, for those who want explaining again, I will explain it, the previous question, again, after I've given everyone an opportunity to have a go at this question. Okay, I'm just going to give everyone else 1 minute. Okay, I'm going to go through this one now. Before I do, I will explain over the previous question. So over here, in the previous question, we were given two coordinates. Whenever we're given two coordinates over here, we work out the gradient. Okay, so over here, we were given two coordinates. We know the line A passes through these two coordinates over here. The first step, because we were given two coordinates, we worked out the gradient of the line. Okay, and the way that you work out the gradient of the line is you work out the change in y divided by the change in x. That's how you work out the gradient. Okay, so you do the difference between the two y coordinates and then you divide it by the difference between the two x coordinates. Okay, and that's why I've labeled them one as the first coordinate and one as the second coordinate. Okay, and we just did -1 minus -5 divided by 10 minus 2. Change in y divided by the change in x. And that gave us a half. That was the gradient of the original line. Okay, now it says we need to work out the equation of the line which is perpendicular to A. Now, if a line is perpendicular, that means we need to work out the negative reciprocal of the original gradient. And the original gradient was a half. The original gradient that we worked out was a half, and we needed to work out the negative reciprocal of a half. So we just need to flip the numerator and the denominator around, which we did, and then it was originally positive, that turned to be negative. So we had the gradient of our perpendicular line is -2. Once we've worked out the gradient of the perpendicular line, we've got y equals mx plus c. We need to construct our new equation, and we know that m is going to be -2 because that's the gradient. So we have -2x plus c. Okay, now we need to make sure that the coordinates 4, 3 over here pass through the line. So we know that the first coordinate is x and the second coordinate is y. We're just going to substitute in those numbers in place of x and y. So in place of x, we're going to have 4, and in place of y, we're going to have 3. And then all we're going to do is we're going to rearrange to make c the subject and work out what c is equal to. So c equals 11. Okay, so c equals 11. Now, once we've worked out what c is, we go back to the original equation over here, y equals -2x plus c. And we, in place of c, we put in what we got. C is 11. So we have y equals -2x plus 11. Okay, for this question, can the answer also be y equals -1 over 0.5x plus 11? So if you do -1 divided by 0.5, -1 divided by 0.5 gives you -2. So you would have to simplify that down to -2. If you did -1 divided by 0.5, that gives you 2. That can be written simpler. So you would have to simplify it to -2. Okay, now going back to this question, so we have line A passes through two coordinates. So we have two coordinates, and because we have two coordinates, we have to work out the gradient between the two coordinates. So we're going to work out the gradient. So over here we have 2, 1, and we have 5, 10. These are our two coordinates. The first number tells you the x, the second one tells you the y. So we have x, y, x, y. Then to work out the gradient, it's the change in y divided by the change in x. Okay, so we're going to label this as 1, label this as 2, and we're going to do 2 subtract 1. So the y coordinates is 10, subtract the first y coordinate, which is 1, divided by the second x coordinate, which is 5, subtract the first x coordinate, which is 2. 10 subtract 1 is 9, 5 subtract 2 is 3. So 9 divided by 3 gives you 3. So the gradient is 3. Okay. Now, what does the question want us to do? The question wants us to work out the equation of a line which is parallel to A. If it's parallel, that means that the gradient is the same. Okay, so the gradient is the same because it's parallel. Okay, so we have y equals mx plus c. We know that the gradient of this line is going to be the same as line A because it's parallel. So we know that the gradient m is going to be 3. So it's going to be y equals 3x plus c. Now we know that it needs to pass through these coordinates 2, 5. We know that the first number is the x, the second number is the y, and we have an x and a y over here as well. So y is 5, so instead of y, we're going to write down 5. Instead of x, we're going to write down 2. So we're going to have 3, 2 plus c. Yeah, and then 3 times 2 is 6. That's equal to 5 plus c, and we want c by itself, so we're going to subtract 6 from both sides. So 5 subtract 6 will just give you -1, and that's equal to c. So we worked out what c is, and now we're just going to go back to the original equation and substitute in what we have found for c. So instead of c, we're going to have -1 because that's what c is. So our final equation is going to be y equals 3x minus 1. Okay, and yes, the gradient is 3. Okay. Okay. Now we're going to skip this question and we're going to go straight to a block. We'll come back to the question if we have time at the end, but we're going to skip to a block, which I'm going to give you guys the link to join. So what you can do is you can go to playblookit.com and you can type in that join code and then join with your name. Please, can we not have any inappropriate words joining because I will just remove them. So just join with your normal name and use the code which is on the screen. If you would like, you can use your initials instead. I'll go back to the original slide after the blockade. Actually, I've removed my working from the slide. I'll go back and, or if you can watch the recording again, you'll have the working there because I've just removed the working from the slide. I'm going to give everyone 2 minutes to join, and then we will start. for anyone else joining. Okay, we are going to make a start now. Okay, so all you have to do is you answer questions, then select us, and basically you can steal gold from others, and then the most gold after 7 minutes will win. Okay, and basically the leaderboard will be on my screen. Okay, guys, you just have under 5 minutes left. Okay, guys, you have around 2 minutes left. Okay, just under a minute left now. Final 20 seconds. 10 seconds left. Okay, so let's have a look. So well done everyone for having a go at that. So Rebecca, you came third, Samuel, you came second, and however, Nick, you came first. Well done everyone for having a go at that. Hopefully, that summarized your understanding on parallel and perpendicular lines, and hopefully, you guys enjoyed it as well. Now, before we end off for today's lesson, what we're gonna have to do is have a go at this final question, and then you guys will be free to go. So it says line A passes through the points 2, 1 and 5, 10. Line B passes through the points 4, 7 and 2, 1. And we need to show that line A and B are parallel. We unfortunately can't play it again. Maybe next lesson we'll have a go at a different one, um, because there's only a few questions that we've gone through today, and there's only a 10 questions. Is going to get very repetitive if we have a go again. So we'll have a go at a different one with a new topic in our next lesson. Okay, we're just going to finish off on this question here. Okay, so to show that two lines are parallel, as you probably saw from the quiz that we just did, one thing must be common. The lines which are parallel must have the same gradient. So to show that this is true, you need to prove that both line A and line B have the same gradient. And in that quiz, there was also a question about calculating gradient. To calculate the gradient, you do the change in y divided by the change in x. So over here, all you're going to do is you're going to deal with line A first, and then you're going to deal with line B second. Okay, so if we deal with line A, okay, if we deal with line A first, the previous answer to this question, I believe it was 3x minus 1. Y equals 3x minus 1. So over here, if we deal with line A first, all you're going to do is you're going to work out the gradient. So we have two coordinates, 2, 1 and 5, 10. So we're going to work out the gradient of this line. So we're going to label this 1 and label this 2. The first is x, the second letter is y, First letter is x, second letter is y. So all we're going to do is the change in y divided by the change in x. And your change in y, as you know, is just going to be the second subtract the first. So it's going to be 10 subtract 1 divided by the change in x, which is 5 subtract 2. Okay, now 10 subtract 1 is 9, 5 subtract 2 is 3, 9 divided by 3 is just 3. So this is your gradient of the first line. Okay, now let's deal with line B now. We need to work out the gradient of line B. We're given two coordinates. So we have 4, 7, and we have 2, 1. Okay, we're going to label this 1 and 2. The first number is the x, second is y, x and y. And again, you're going to do the change in y divided by the change in x. So you're going to do the y, second y coordinate, subtract the first y coordinate, so it's going to be 1 minus 7. And then you're going to divide it by the second x coordinate, subtract the first x coordinate. So it's 2 subtract 4. 1 minus 7 gives you minus 6, and 2 minus 4 gives you minus 2. And minus 6 divided by minus 2 gives you 3. And as you can see, this is the gradient of line B, and both gradients of both lines are the same. Okay, so what we would say is that the gradient of both lines is the same. Therefore, the two lines are parallel to each other. Okay, that's what we would say for a question like that.